to another episode of The Ultimate Creative. I'm your host, Emily Milling, and with me today, I've got my pal,
Matt Ardill.
That's the one and only Matt Ardill. He is a producer. He is a podcast guy. He does all the things. He is also a hilarious stand-up comedian, and he's going to share with us his creative career journey and all of the things he knows about podcasting that we can fit into this episode. And at the end, we're going to do a very special comedy segment. It won't be us doing stand-up, though. Oh my God, Matt, thank you so much for being on the show. How is your day going?
Great. Thanks for inviting me, Emily. It's going pretty good. Pretty good. No complaints. So, yeah. And you?
Oh, well, I'm still in my apartment for the next foreseeable decade. Okay, I'm going to kick it off with, I want to know everything about before I met you. So I met you almost a year ago, so happy friendiversary, first of all. And when I met you, we were at Second City taking an improv class together, and you were producing your show, Comedy Album Book Club. How long had you been doing that for before I managed to finally come into your circle of being and light?
I think it had been probably about a year at that point that we had been doing it. We recorded for the first year. We were recording out of the Social Capital Theatre. I was recording with my friend Jason, who was the host at the time. And we'd been going for a while. We started recording not too long before we met out of my apartment as opposed to the theater. So that was sort of like when you're sort of shifting gears and changing things around a little bit. But yeah. So probably a couple of months out of my apartment and about a year and a bit since we had started.
What is it about podcasting, though? Why did you start doing a podcast in the first place?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, one is like, middle-aged white guy with my midlife crisis. I had to find something more positive than Corvettes and 18-year-olds.
God.
Really though, it's a really great platform to tell your own stories, to bring your own voice, and it's a very equal platform in that there's a very low bar of entry. It's inexpensive to get your podcast up and out and on the air. In some cases, it can be as much as nothing or as little as nothing. There's free hosts. The technology that you have is readily available, and it's only as expensive as you want it to be. And it's one of those cases where it's still very much a Wild West, so formats are not as it's changing slowly, but it's not as solidified into this is what a podcast is and this is how it has to be, and this is what the end product is going to always come out as. Like when we're doing comedy, for example, where we write sketches, it's like, oh, these are the formats that you work in, and this is the structure of the sketch, and it's very hammered home how you shape it. Because there's decades of experience there, where in the reality there's maybe 10 solid years of podcasting, and everybody's still trying to figure out what they want to do with it.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, and people can use podcasting for anything. I think your podcast is really born out of a passion project, which is really similar to my partner Justin, who does the Important Cinema Club, and then a podcast that I did years ago with my friend Jenny Tang called Her Name Is, and it was about promoting creative women in the city of Toronto. And it sounds like yours kind of came out of the same situation where you were really interested in something and then wanted to talk about it. Were you always planning on doing something about comedy, or had you ever thought about doing a podcast for any other reason?
Oh, this was my first. I mean, I've thought about, I should do stuff for years when I was listening to podcasts, but I always sort of like a little second guessing myself. Then my friend Jason and I, originally it started as like he wanted to do it like a real book club, where he and his comedy, because Jason, who was the prior host, he is a sketch actor. He's an actor, a voice actor, very talented guy.
Voice of an angel.
Yes, it's just like melted butter. So he loved comedy. We went to high school together, and through Facebook, because that's how everybody seems to pass ideas around a lot of the times nowadays. He threw this idea out there, and then it just sort of did it because everybody has crazy schedules. The actual real life meet space uh, comedy album book club never happened. So I was like, hey, I'd like to do this as a podcast because this is something I love. I mean, I listened to comedy on the radio as a kid. I've watched Saturday Night Live almost all of my life, like from a very inappropriately young age up till now. And he's like, oh, well, actually, I was thinking of doing the same thing. So we combined forces and it just happened. And, after I guess about 3 episodes ago, he retired because he felt like, he had told all the stories. Talked about the albums that he felt were important. But in
Yeah.
that time, it helped me discover my other passions and helped me like get over these other fears and phobias of, oh, I'm not good enough. I mean, I'm still a comedy baby, in a lot of ways. I'm still learning and I'm still growing, but it gave me the guts to go out and do that. So it's one of those things where it was born out of a passion for something and then fed that passion and allowed me to go even further with it and explore other areas.
I want to come back to that a little bit later, but maybe can you tell us a little bit about the format of the podcast? So you will bring people in, you bring in comedians to talk about albums that have inspired them, right?
Yes, yeah, correct. What we do is we have a featured panelist, and that featured panelist decides on the album that we're going to listen to that session. Um, it's usually going to be something that it doesn't have to be something they liked. We had one time where it was Adam Sandler's. What was it? They're gonna laugh at you. I think it was. They're all gonna laugh at you. But yeah, so he had a sketch album which was remarkably well produced. Like they did their own foley on the entire thing. I was shocked at how high the production values were for such terrible sketches. But it had like a great cast. Like all of the best of his generation of SNL were on it. And it was just truly it was a train wreck and interesting to behold. But yeah, so we have somebody on. They choose an album as varied as like an evening with Mike Nichols and Elaine May. That was her first album. We've done Robin Williams. We've done the Smothers Brothers, Lenny Bruce. So we've covered like this huge scope and swath of comedy history, and it's usually been because somebody found it inspirational or transformative to their work. And then we try to get like 2 or 3 other people on. How I ended up being on the show was we just couldn't find a guest to fill that last seat, and that just kept happening. So I ended up becoming the permanent fourth chair. Um, and yeah, and we'll listen to it together. We don't air that obviously because we can't afford the rights. It's like I've got it's one of those things where people like there have been YouTube or not YouTube iTunes complaints and like they didn't air the album. It's like yeah, because I don't have the money to air Bob
Yeah.
Newhart's freaking album on a podcast for
Yeah.
free. Thank you very much.
Exactly.
But we give a warning at the top, so this person just was not paying attention. And yeah, but then we'll listen to it together. We'll sit down, then we'll just talk about it, and we'll just talk about our favorite bits, talk about the historical importance and context, which it can really change the perspective of a piece of work. Like Lenny Bruce is an example of an artist who I understand academically why they're important and what they were doing, but from actually listening to their stuff, like just clean without any context going in, I'm like, this isn't funny to me. But then when I'm able to sit down and historically look at it, I'm like, oh, okay, I can figure out what he was actually doing here and why he was saying that, and I can get where the laugh is coming from, and I learn to appreciate it. So it's like through these conversations and collaborations. So that's most of our work. Occasionally, we also do interviews. I've been pretty lucky in that regard. We had an interview with Patton Oswalt. That was our first interview. We got super lucky on that, and that was just one of those cases of what's the worst case scenario that will happen when you reach out to a publicist? They say no. That's the worst case scenario. In this case, they said yes. But I've had some great comedians.
Well, tell me what that moment was like. I mean, like the first time you actually did this. I was going to ask you, like, how do you find all these people to be on the show and how do you get them interested in it? Like, tell us everything about that aspect of
Sure.
it.
Well, the finding people to be on the show, it's one of those things that it's both easy and hard. It appears hard, but is deceptively easy, and that is just going out and talking to people. And it's the same at both tiers. Comedians love to make themselves heard. They love to talk about comedy. So it's just a matter of building up those relationships and building up those friendships, and then reaching out to people. Um,
And
you
you
know,
go
it,
out to a lot of the festivals, right? Like, would you say that's how you do a lot of your comedy networking, or are there other avenues that you pursue? Because I mean, comedy school is great and all, but we're typically all amateurs. So,
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think just going out to the clubs, talking to people after shows, getting to know them. I mean, it has become easier. I mean, I had the bonus of having Jason, who had years of experience and connections to go from, to start to sort of kickstart it there. But he sort of bowed out of the booking stage for about a year, less than about 8 months in. So I was helping with the booking at that case, and it was just reaching out to comedians throughout the city. I mean, we did an interview with a couple of years ago with all of the, well, about a year, so the 2018 Junos, all of the comedy nominees for that. And this was you know Dave Merhej. Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting some names there, but Mace Galone, just a bunch of Canadian comedians, and we just reached out and said, "Hey, we want to interview all the Juno nominees for this year's nominations," and every one of them said, "Sure." They said yes, because they're like, "Yeah, I'd love to talk about my album. I'd love to talk about comedy." And it's just like, as long as you don't come in with a sense of entitlement or a sense of like demanding their presence, most people are happy to talk. I mean, it's a slightly different story when working through publicists and bigger names. Like with Patton, I reached out to his publicist and he arranged it. Mateo Lane, who's a hilarious comedian out of New York City, I saw him one year when my wife Heather and I went down to New York at the Comedy Cellar. He just killed, hilarious. He's this beautiful, beautiful man, who he's a trained opera singer, an illustrator, an animator, and a stand-up comedian. Just started breaking into comedy in Italian for some Italian tourists in the audience. So I was like, okay, what's his rep? Like, I'm never gonna get him. He was at just JFL 42. So I just looked up, who do I want to interview at JFL 42. Tried their publicists, and in a few cases, like I wanted to interview Maria Bamford. That didn't work out, but then she put me in touch with some other people, and that all came together. So yeah, so it's just like, people are willing to help as long as you're not a jerk about it. It's a really positive sort of space. Most and comedians like to hear ourselves talk a lot.
I think there's two really big takeaways from that though. Like, one, be a nice person, and two, if you want to do it, you have to go out and do it and just pretend like there's absolutely nothing to lose. Most of the time there just isn't, right? Like, I think a lot of people get really caught up in their heads and think like, "Oh, I could never be the person to interview Patton Oswalt." Well, I mean, all you have to do is ask, right? Like, it's just as simple as asking. And if there's a rejection, whatever, practice your rejections, ask your fake plant, could I take you for coffee? And your fake plant is never going to say yes. So you're just going to practice being rejected over and over. And it's going to make it so much easier when you need to go out and get those big asks, like, just make it less huge in your head. And it sounds like you really found a way to make that, part of your process overall. And it's allowing you to have such an amazing output on your show. Very cool.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think there's only one no that got me down, but then I tried to spin it, and it was still like, it was not a nasty no or anything. It was not take a short long walk off a short pier kid kind of thing. It was like, yeah, Weird Al. Weird Al is one of my dream gets. Like if I get Weird Al on the show ever, I can die a happy man the next day.
Ugh, Weird Al.
But
I
yeah,
tag him in everything. He's never responded to me. Probably
well,
because he's not actually running his Instagram account.
I'm pretty sure he has people
Yeah.
for that. But yeah, like I wrote to his publicist. The first time they didn't even respond. The second time they said no, thank you, and I mean that stung more than any other no. But at the same time, it's like they responded, so I was still able to like take that no, and like they acknowledged my existence in the room, which is better than it was the last time. And the next time I feel the right opportunity has come up, then maybe they'll consider it again. So it never hurts, and it's if you build on that momentum and take that experience and just keep going forward. Because like yeah, so there's no downside to somebody saying no. All they're going to do is go forward, and then you'll have another opportunity to ask somebody else, or it may lead to an even greater experience with a different
Mm,
guest.
yeah. I want to ask a little bit about like some of the challenges that you have. So I'm going to be on your show in 2 days' time, and I'm going to be on it with my troupe, Big Chick Energy. And it took us forever. Like you could not wrangle us to pick anything to talk about until like, I don't know, 2 days ago we decided on it. So like that is, I know that's probably going to be a challenge for other guests that are on the show, or maybe like guests that come on who aren't talking, or maybe they're not a good interview subject like you thought they were going to be. What are some of the big challenges that you come up against, and how do you work through those?
Sure. Well, you know, as far as one-on-one interviews, I've been really lucky, and all the people I've sat down with have been very kind and generous. Um, but in panel shows, it's a little bit. I think that helps. You're not dependent on any one person. So you can move the conversation around if it's starting to drag, or if you have a person who's just not getting it, you can just sort of shift the conversation a bit. So that does help. I mean, the big challenge, yeah, is getting people who care about something, because like with Comedy Album Book Club, um, it's all about that passion piece, that thing that shaped you, or youth is an important element of history that we want to talk about. And or it could be something new that you think is gonna like change the world, like we did a John Mulaney show not too long, about probably about 6 or 7 months ago. And it was like, yeah, I mean, that's a new show, it's a new special, a new album, but I think is what we thought is one of those ones that's like really important, because it's just going to go down as like masterful joke telling. So it's like finding one that's like not too obscure. Like one album we had, like John Elton, who was one of the co-writers of Blackadder, and like the Young Ones. So amazing talent, completely unknown outside of the UK on a name basis. Like most of us have probably seen him. I was lucky in that I wasn't hosting at that point as the fourth chair. Jason was sick, and his wife Helena filled in for him. And I was like, man, I do not envy your position right now, because this is a person I hadn't heard of before being assigned this, and you're dropped in the seat in the last minute. So yeah, so that's right. I mean, for me, one big thing is I try to have like a list of questions, just a list of things to hit on to keep the ball moving, and just pay attention to how the guests feel. You know, if you can tell they're kind of struggling, don't dwell on it. Like let it move, and just let it be conversation. And it doesn't have to be like this big formal thing. Just let it go back and forth.
Yeah. Oh, that is something that I have struggled with a lot. So I picked people to interview like right off the top for this podcast that I like was 100% comfortable with before I started getting into anybody that was like, maybe I don't know them as well. So I've really lucked out that I know so many amazing creative people to get this all started with. I want to ask you, Matt, totally sidebar, what inspired you to start taking comedy classes in the first place?
Well, it's one of those things that I've always wanted to do, but was terrified to do. And then when doing the podcast, I was like, so I've got like people who have options films, like scripts for films. I've got people who've been on, this hour. I've got like, members of the Sketchersons, like all these super crazy funny people coming into my this circle, and I'm like having to interact with them, and I'm like, I'm a former IT guy who works in an insurance now. I don't feel I'm able to sit in like be up there. I mean, I love it from a nerdy kind of perspective, but I don't have the ability to hang in a like a quippy kind of way. So I was just nervous. I'm like, I'll take some improv. What's the like? I'll go out. I'll sign up for a Second City course. That'll make me feel a little bit more comfortable in my skin. Make me feel like I can like roll in the moment with them. And then that turned into a love of improv, and which turned into a love of I mean, it's a love of doing it, and then a love of doing sketch and a love of doing stand up. So it's just like it was like really just came down to I was scared. I was scared in that moment, and I found this tool to help me get past that fear and realize, oh, I have nothing to be actually afraid of. It's that those nerves are self-defeating, and just roll with it. And then that just led to me exploring all these other options and opportunities.
Well, now, like, I mean, like, your stand up chops are just getting better and better every time you do a show. Like, you're really crushing it, and you've clearly found your niche. And I feel like this is a really difficult question for a lot of people who are creatives in some capacity, like myself included. I always find some way to like stuff down the creative part of me. What do you think was like, if I don't know if there was maybe a moment or like maybe some sort of over time you realized, what was it that got you from I want to interview comedians to I want to be a comedian, and like accepting that in your head?
I It's hard to put a finger on any one moment. I think it's probably that level C class that I took with you when I first met you. That was when it really gelled, like making people laugh. Because like I
You have some
for the
really funny, weird shit in that class.
there was, and for the audience, like I joined in Emily's class in level C because I'd been taking Sundays, and that was just like people who were professionals who it's the only day of the week that they could find, and it was sort of there's a commitment differential there. It wasn't that they didn't care, but it's like they didn't have enough commitment to find time in the week. And like I think there's maybe two people in that class who really cared about doing improv. It wasn't I'm taking this as a skill set for my day job. But then I'm in this class with all these funny people in level C on a Tuesday night who are like finding a way to make a Tuesday at 6 o'clock at night work for them from their day jobs and from all their other things that they're doing. And then they stick around afterwards and shows afterwards,
Yeah,
or go out for
drink
drinks, and
far too much.
drink way too many buckets of beer. And yeah, and it was like there was a camaraderie there, and that's when it's like, oh no, this is more than a skill. This is fun, and this is something I'm enjoying. And I mean, I had some great teachers. I mean, we've had great teachers together during that process at Second City, and it's sort of like a momentum thing. But I think that was the turning point. I found a community of people where I felt I could create with, and that just inspired me to create more.
Yeah, and then we did a bajillion shows together, and you produced a couple of them. Well, you're still producing shows right now as we are in quarantine. You're doing comedians in apartments drinking water, which I got to be on. I got to do sketch on a Zoom call. It was very weird for my brain to comprehend, but the stand-up works really well on the show.
Well, your sketch worked great too. I mean, that was a week before SNL did it, and honestly,
true.
your sketches were funnier than most of the first week of SNL sketches
I think you have to say that because
easily.
you're my friend.
It's true. You guys made use of the platform in a great way, which it took them till the second show to realize, oh no, that's what makes it funny. Don't pretend the platform's not there. Acknowledge it, and that disarms the awkwardness of it. You're embracing the challenge at that point, and that's, I think, why your sketches worked so well. Every one of them made use of that, and it was terrific.
Well, the
But
question
yeah.
was actually about your producing and whether or not like is that something you want to do more of, producing more shows in the city, or are you going to stick to podcasting? What are you
I'm
thinking?
I'm gonna stick to podcasting. I'm currently also producing another show, well, no, another podcast. Love is Everywhere, for the hilarious comedian Tracy Hamilton. She's a Toronto-based comedian. It actually stems from her show that ran at Comedy Bar for about 2 years, and it's a great premise where she would assign a comedian cognitive behavioral therapy exercises, and then they would do their set, and then they talk about the exercise, and talk about the exercise was I mean, their sets are funny because they're funny people that were on her show, but that conversation was the more meaty bit, and she just decided to, I'm going to keep that conversation going. So we're about 36 episodes in now. So she's been going in quarantine, and I mean, I've been enjoying doing the Zoom calls. I mean, I wouldn't mind doing something in real life, but when quarantine ends, but I'm going to try to keep it going during this period, if only as a place for people to be able to perform. I mean, a lot of people love to laugh, but a lot of people, like comedians and comedy adjacent people, like helping people laugh, and it's as much as important for them to get out there and make people laugh as it is for people to laugh. um, and yeah, so I mean, I'm going to keep it going, and it's fun. I mean, it's a different sort of set of challenges and experiences, but I mean, it sort of goes back to the podcast in the same way. From day one, I've been working in a production role there, and it's sort of carrying forward that same ethos of bringing something to people, bringing joy, bringing something interesting out there, and letting people have fun with it.
It was very eloquently put, Matt. Very eloquent.
Thanks.
That was fun, though. Okay, Matt. Is there anything else that you want to plug before we wrap up, or anything else you want to say? Plug away.
Sure. Okay. Check out Comedians in Apartments Drinking Water every 2 weeks. We're on Facebook. Love is Everywhere by Tracy Hamilton. I edit and produce it, and it was recorded in my home back when we could leave the house. And then, of course, Comedy Album Book Club. We've got a couple of good episodes coming up. Following that is our great Cobra Baby episode with Big Chick Energy. So that's going to be fun. That's you. We're going to, yeah, and it's going to be, we're kind of changing the format a bit with that episode.
I'm in that.
So moving forward, it's going to be Comedy Pizza Party, a little bit more fun. And that's going to be the first episode.
You know I love pizza.
You love pizza. So yeah, excellent.
I have another question that I forgot to ask you earlier. What do you think that podcasting has done to not just to help you with networking, but also to, I would say, like, elevate your status in the comedy world? Like, what do you think your podcast has done to help you become a thought leader or an industry expert, for lack of a better term? Because I don't think comedy has those terms.
Yeah, I mean, it's helped me approach the subject from an academic sort of manner. Like, a lot of comedians just get out, and especially young comedians will just get out and do the open mics, and they're sort of disdainful towards comedy classes. They're disdainful, and like they don't want to listen to something. But it's helped me sort of sit down and try to understand the subject of comedy and how it's evolved. But it's also helped me learn to just talk with other comedians and socialize with them. By talking with them in this context of the podcast, it's made me more comfortable and understanding better how to talk with them outside of that context, and it's been just really useful in that regard.
That's awesome. All right, Matt. Is there anything else you want to add to anything that I may have missed, or anything else you want to plug, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, everybody, if you have an idea, go for it. Like I said, it's podcasting is such a low bar of entry as far as technology is concerned. You can record it on something as simple like a $60 mic on your PC. Like even a portable digital recorder, like what we were using for the first season of the show, is only about $80. It's not expensive. You can get audio editing software for free. Uh, Platforms will let you post your podcasts for free as well. You just have to let them advertise on it. So yeah, go for it. Just everybody go for it. If you have a story you want to tell, worst case scenario, you make this story and you put it out there. It's never gonna hurt. Just go for it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate
Thanks,
you
Emily.
being on the show and sharing all of your insights and everything you've learned. And I'll talk to you in 2 days on your show.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. Talk to you then. Okay.